Welcome to another Quran study. God willing, today we will be starting from Surah 9, verse 16, the inevitable test. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The inevitable test. Do you think that you will be left alone without God distinguishing those among you who strive and never ally themselves with God's enemies, or the enemies of His messenger, or the enemies of the believers? God is fully cognizant of everything we do. The idol worshippers are not to frequent the masjids of God while confessing their disbelief. These have nullified their works, and they will abide forever in hell. The only people to frequent God's masjids are those who believe in God in the last day and observe the contact prayer salat and give the obligatory charity zakat and do not fear except God. These will surely be among the guided ones. So, as you can see in the subtitle, it says the inevitable test. Their test, and there will be other people who will not ally with them, and those will be the people that will be successful. Now, it's interesting how the two verses are connected, following this verse about the inevitable test, and we can see uh, how that works. There are these people who are idol worshippers who confess their disbelief. You know, I mean, we talked about idol worship and how easy it is to fall into idol worship. It's not simply you worship Jesus or Muhammad or someone. I mean, you start upholding other sources besides God. You're an idol worshiper. Also, I mean, you give powers to other religious authorities, like scholars and imams. You're an idol worshiper. I mean, there's so many ways, different ways you can be idol worshippers uh, in your daily basis, and they will be from this group, and you will come they don't have to disbelieve in everything. They can disbelieve in part masjids purified, that you don't allow these people to be there. God is telling you that they're not to come here, you know. So we have a responsibility to keep God's masjids dedicated to God alone. And if you do allow these people to come and pollute your masjid while they're confessing their disbelief, they'll be spreading their poison, and you're letting them. You're failing your test when you're doing that. It's pretty clear, and a lot of people like to dance around it, um, because it's difficult for them to, either because they may have some kind of dependence, some kind of sympathy, or something connected to these people which is stopping them, uh, and they start fooling themselves, or they think that they can guide these people who have been sent astray by God by letting them come in, which is against God's law at this time. I mean, it's different if somebody doesn't know and somebody hasn't made a stand and they're coming and you're talking to them. But if someone's made their stand and they're against the believers and they're their enemies, they're their enemies, actual enemies, and you still allow them to come into God's messages while they're confessing their disbelief. I mean, that is a crime with God, and people who facilitate these kinds of people and allow them to come into God's messages and spread doubt and poison, are among these people, for not standing up for God and for not doing their part. Obviously, it's difficult if this is done by one person, but if everyone in the masjid is doing that, it would be easy, and it wouldn't be such a hard job. But it's something that God is setting as a standard for a masjid of God. A masjid of God is a place where these people are not welcome. But if you see a masjid where all these idol worshippers are coming and they're welcome, then it's not really a masjid of God anymore. It's a masjid of idol worshippers. And God says, that we shouldn't be praying in those masjids where, the religious practices are not absolutely devoted to God alone, where they're not upholding the Quran alone. I mean, it's not a masjid of God anymore, because it just belongs to idol worshippers at that time. So, I mean, it's a very, very hard test. Um, Speaking from experience, it is a very difficult test that pretty much most people uh, can easily fail, if they're lax about it. Um, and God says that the only people to frequent God's masjid are those who believe in God and believe in the last day. Who frequent God's masjids, there might be some kind of opposition. People will think that I'm too harsh, or what they could have, or people will blame me, and things like that, or people will see me as someone who is not very friendly or welcoming. There could be many excuses that they can come up with, but they will have fear, either for fear of some sort from the people, from the enemies that allows them to come in, or fear from other people that they may judge them in a way that they don't want to be judged, and they will, fail their test. But a person who will pass this test is the one who will not fear except God, and who will always do the right thing, no matter if it brings opposition, if it brings resistance, if it brings arguments and disputes. But the thing is, the most important thing is to uphold God's laws. I mean, we see a lot of people focus on this, concept of unity, and I put it in the quotes because people use this word each other. The real believers have to be united,
I
but not.
say something every 2 3 minutes. It shuts off for like 30 seconds and restarts.
Mhm.
Yes, there's
Yeah, I think
something
I've
with.
been seeing that too. Just give me one sec. Is the volume okay? Why am I hearing myself?
The volume is fine. Right now it's echoing, but
Okay, why is there echo?
uh,
I think it's from your side. No.
I
Oh,
don't know if
maybe
Mildred,
I
do
know
you
why.
hear echo?
Mm, oh, oh,
Oh, sorry, echo was on my
it's
part.
from your side, yeah. Okay, I think it's better. I can still hear myself. Are you? Anybody put me
Oh,
on speaker? Ali, can you try to mute?
I'm on headphone.
Okay, but just try to mute for a second. Um, okay. Oh, no, still.
Yeah, there's still echo.
I think the actual problem is gone, but
Oh, it's gone now.
the echo is gone.
Yeah, echo is gone.
No, it's gone.
Uh, yeah. Mhm.
Why am I hearing myself? Okay, so coming back. Thanks for pointing that out. Um, okay. So it says the only people to frequent God's message are those who believe in God on the last day and observe the contact prayers and give the obligatory charity and do not fear except God. These will surely be among the guided ones. So we have to make sure that. um, we should clearly see where our decisions are coming from. Are they coming from the fear of God, or are they coming from the fear of okay, let's okay, I think Hopefully this should work. So let me know if it happens again. So we were talking about verse number 19, question to the Arabs. So it's interesting. It's Surah 9, verse number 19. And if you add the digits of the surah and the verse number, also adds up to be 19. So the question to the Arabs is, have they considered the watering of pilgrims and caring for the masjid a substitute for believing in God in the last day and striving in the cause of God? So as you can see that God says these are not equal in the sight of God. You know, for a lot of people, they think that because these Arabs are doing that, that they're okay.
It's doing it again, Solomon.
I don't know. Is it the same for you guys or is it just on YouTube?
YouTube also.
It's no on the phone too.
Hmm.
Yeah, YouTube
It
also
never
screen
happened before.
freezes. Hmm.
It logs you out and then just everything disappears.
You wanna restart maybe
It is
the
new.
system?
Um, okay, maybe let me change my network. I don't know.
Probably something to do with the network.
Did you pay your internet bill? I'm just kidding.
It's on autopay. Let's see. Sorry about the disruption. People trying to focus on the study keep getting distracted by these things. Yeah, okay. I think it's possible some kind of network issue must be going on. So let me know if it still happens. Just to make sure that it doesn't happen from my phone. Let's disconnect. Okay. 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 So God willing, I'll start with uh, well, I was talking about verse 19, so maybe I'll continue a little bit. So, the Arabs do care for the masjid. They keep spending millions of dollars on it, expanding it, renovating it, and everything. But when it comes to striving in the cause of God and Believing in God, they don't believe in God. And this may come as a surprise to a lot of people, but they don't actually believe in God because they believe in idol worship. They idolize Muhammad, and the scholars, you know, they're all enemies of God. They're the number one enemies of God. God said the Arabs are the worst in their hypocrisy, and there's such big hypocrites that when you actually start to see what goes on inside their societies, you will begin to see the extent of the hypocrisy that goes on. Obviously, in a lot of these Muslim countries, they don't talk about the hypocrisy because they depend on them for monetary gains and a lot of other things, um, or they might just be like them as well. Um, but we know that if you, I mean, in this information age, you can, just find out everything about them. You can read about it. It's not something hidden. I mean, but apart from their double standards in life and their double lives that they live, um, I mean, religiously, they're enemies of God. And when the mathematical miracle of the Quran came around, I mean, they bought there's they bought all the copies of the mathematical miracle in Arabic and they burned them, just as an example. So they're actually fighting God. They're striving to fight against the message. They're doing quite the opposite. And God said these are not the same. So we have to remember, it's not just limited to the sacred masjid. It could be, other places too. There could be groups of people or organizations that will seem to care for masjids and seem to cater the people who come to these masjids or people who come to some sort of gatherings and like from around the world maybe even, and they cater for them and they provide them food and things like that and place to stay. They organize these things for them, but they actually don't themselves, they don't actually believe in God and the messenger, and they actually don't strive in the cause of God, but they actually strive against the message. God says these people are not equal, clearly. I mean, it's like, okay, there you have someone who's like a servant, like helping people, but they're not the same. A person who's just helping people around, doing things is not the same as someone who's actually striving in the cause of God and being a submitter, a believer. Clearly they're two separate things. Um, I mean, and a lot of them, they're doing it for monetary gains. They're doing it for tourism. They're doing it to get money from it. Obviously, if, if they could stop these people from coming, if it wasn't for the money, they would do it, right? But still, it's such a hard thing for them that they don't want to do it. It's such a hassle for them that they limited it to a small period of time instead of the 4 months that God had given us to visit the Kaaba for Hajj, which is a duty upon every submitter once in a lifetime. Instead of allowing people to do their Hajj for 4 months, they just manipulated the 4 months first, which in itself is such a big crime. But then they shortened the period of Hajj to just 10 days that the people are actually allowed, and they let, millions of people, come during that time and inconvenience the whole world, and there's stampedes and fires and, so many bad things happen. So many things that they don't even talk about, but so many things that they can't hide. Also, like stampedes and stuff that I mentioned. So, um, I mean, they wouldn't even want these people coming in if it wasn't for the money. It is something that they rely on, and it's just a business too in a way. It's keeps them going. Um, but God says it's not a substitute. The bottom line is, it's not a substitute for striving in the cause of God and believing in God. Imagine someone who is taking care of the Kaaba, taking care of all the pilgrims, versus someone who is just a believer or a submitter and he's striving. and he actually believes in what he's striving for. He's a believer. God says they're not the same. You know, his rank is much higher than the person who's at Kaaba and watering everyone and taking care of it and cleaning the place and renovating it and all of that, right? It doesn't mean anything. Verse 20, good news. Those who believe and immigrate and strive in the cause of God with their money and their lives are far greater in rank in the sight of God. These are the winners. Their Lord gives them good news, mercy, and approval from Him, and gardens where they rejoice in everlasting bliss. Eternally they abide therein. God possesses a great recompense. SubhanAllah. So, as the subtitle says, good news. So this Quran brings good news for the people, and these verses talk about that good news. But it's only for those who believe in God and immigrate and strive with their money and their lives. They should be happy to read this good news that God is giving them in the Quran. SubhanAllah, that they are gonna get mercy from God. They're gonna get approval from God, um, and they will rejoice in gardens of everlasting bliss, where they will abide eternally, as God says. So I mean, because would there be anything better than that? Uh, having the most luxurious life that you could ever you cannot even imagine. Not that you could ever imagine, but you cannot even imagine. It's beyond imagination. A luxurious life where you live eternally and you have God's approval. God who is a Lord of the heavens and the earth, you have His approval. Imagine if you have, the president's approval, and you'd be so proud, but you have God's approval. I mean, if you truly believe in God, I mean, that's, uh, unbelievable. And you are set for life, and the afterlife, not just life, but the afterlife. Imagine, like, if someone gets these big mansions in this world, I mean, and they are there for 40 years, 50 years, another 50 years to live in that, and no one's going to take it away from them or anything, and they own it, and you're like, wow, that's great. You got all these things, but compared to hereafter, obviously this is nothing, because when we leave, it's all going to go to nothing. But this is eternal. This is real. You will have palaces and mansions and gardens. Uh, I mean, this is all allegorical, but it's much more than what you can imagine. Doesn't it doesn't lessen it to tell you that these are allegorical. It means that it's much better. But you, the reason it's an allegory is so that you can relate to it now, because you haven't seen how beautiful it is. So it's being described in allegorical ways. Like, for example, when Quran says, that there'll be rivers of milk and honey and wine, and people make fun of it. Like, who wants milk and honey in paradise? And if people say all kinds of things, but I mean, these are allegories to help us understand what it's going to be like. It's going to be that and more. God says you can have anything there you want, and you can have it forever. I mean, we as kids, we read stories of these magical pots, for example. That a magician or comes, or I don't know, a fairy or whatever, and gives you tell them, obviously this person would be, eat porridge for a day and then they'll be done with it. It's like, what am I going to do with all this porridge? But in the hereafter, you get everything you could ever imagine, and I mean, it's real. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a fantasy. It's real. We have the mathematical proof for that. So this is truly, truly great news. Awesome news for us, and we should strive to be in that position where we can truly enjoy that. Um, so God says, if you have to make a choice, verse 23, um, now this is part of the test too. It says, "O you who believe, do not ally yourselves even with your parents and your siblings if they prefer disbelieving over believing. Those among you who ally themselves with them are transgressing." Important criterion, verse 24, proclaim. If your parents, your children, your siblings, your spouses, your family, the money you have earned, a business you worry about, and the homes you cherish are more beloved to you than God and his messenger and striving in his cause, then just wait until God brings his judgment. God does not guide the wicked people. And the footnote for this verse says, since the odds are overwhelming against any human being to actually believe in and devote the worship to God alone, 12:103 and 106, it is virtually impossible to see a whole family believe. Thus, most believers have been faced with the choice either me or God and his messenger. This choice is consistently stated by spouses of the believers or their parents, their children, etc. Consistently, the believers made the right choice. This is a mandatory test for all believers. 29, Surah 29, verse 2. And let's read Surah 29, verse 2 actually. It says, the test is mandatory. Do the people think that they'll be left alone to say we believe without being put to the test? We have tested those before them, for God must distinguish those who are truthful and he must expose the liars. And then the second footnote for 29 for 924 says the Quranic mathematical evidence points specifically at God's messenger of the covenant by adding the geometrical value of Rashad plus the value of Khalifa 725 plus the verse number 24, we get 1254 or 19 times 66. Um, so this is specifically pointing at God's messenger of the covenant. So if we as submitters have to make a choice, you know, um, there could be um, scenarios where you don't have to make a choice, right? You could have, you could live with your spouse, for example, who's a disbeliever, and she doesn't care whether you're a submitter or not. You don't have to make a choice. You can live. You don't have to break your marriage, for example. Or you could have parents who are idol worshippers. They respect your religion, and you live there and you treat them amicably, thinking that they could become submitters one day, maybe. You have hope for them. But there will be people that will be hostile and they'll make life miserable for you, and they'll try to stand between you and your religion, and you'll be forced to make a choice. And if you're forced to make a choice between them and God, they'll say either you leave this religion or you leave these teachings, or you, um, leave me if you can't, you know. Or even if they don't state it, but you're faced in a choice where you have to make that choice where it becomes unbearable for you to practice your religion and live with them at the same time, or be with them at the same time. So this is an inevitable test. God says this is a mandatory test, and we're all required to go through it. When you go to college, there are mandatory courses and there's optional ones, and the mandatory ones you can't go around, and then you have to be tested for those courses. So this is one of those things. God says we will all be faced with that, and um, At some point, we will have to make that choice. Um, and so this is where you'll be exposed. Whether are you giving lip service? Because when we before we came to this world, we promised God that we were going to follow Him. We'll do what He says. And when we become submitters, we claim that we are submitting to His commands. But then the test is going to expose who actually will do that. You know, Obviously, the verses are about allying with these people. Now allying is not even just being, cordial to someone, uh, but it's much more than that. You're actually supporting them. You're actually helping them. If you have countries that you use the word ally, they're united for some kind of a cause together. They help each other. And in this case, when they're allying themselves, um, they're actually uh, not just allying for a cause, but they could be faced with a choice where they just say, you either you stay with me um, or you leave me and have your religion. If you now these people are enemies of God, and if they tell you to be with me or leave this thing, now what happens is when you make that choice to be with them, you're not just saying, okay, I'll be with you, but I'll also practice my religion. That's not a choice. The choice is, yes, I'll be with you, and I'll leave my practices for you so I can be happy with you. Whether it's your parents, your children, your spouses, whatever. So you are actually making that choice, then you're allying with them, right? You're not allying with them if you say, no, I will practice my religion, I'll do what God says, and but I will not fight you if you don't fight me. If you leave me alone, I will leave you alone. That's not allying with them. The allying is if you say, yes, I will be with you, I'll follow you, I'll do what you're saying, and I will leave whatever I'm doing. So then I become your partner in crime. Like I will actually be on the same side as you, right? So I will help you. That's allying clearly. When that's why it says when you're faced with a choice. So right now, uh, if you say to whoever your spouse is or your parents or your children that no, I'm gonna stand by the truth, I'm gonna stand with God, and I'm gonna practice what God says, you're not allying with them at that point, right? At that point, you're allying with God. Um, and so that's the important criterion that if you have to make a choice, the subtitle says if you have to make a choice, your choice should always be to stand with God. And God says if that or the business, a lot of times it may be just bad for somebody's business. They could have, for example, business relations with the disbelievers or the enemies, where it actually hurts them to be with the believers. It actually benefits them financially that they side with these hypocrites or disbelievers against the believers, and um, or they care so much about their home that they live in. Let's say you're married to someone, and you find out that, yeah, if you make that choice, you will lose your home or you lose your business because you have to sell part of it or something. Several scenarios where we could be tested in several different ways, right? And so this test is amazing because I mean, anything that is dear to you, you could be tested with this way, right? Okay, is it this? Is it this? Is it this? And the whole idea is just to test you as a person. Where where are all your loyalties and devotion? Is it with your spouse? Is it with your children? Is it with your parents? Is it with your business? Is it with your home? Right? Or is it with God? And so this is why it becomes so mandatory, because that's really the whole thing That's why, this whole elaborate plan to see if we're really going to be with God or we're going to be with, other people or other entities, So this becomes a very important test, and it's a very hard test, uh, you know. But God will make it very easy for you if you're with God. If you're strongly with God, you'll pass it. Like we say, you pass it with flying colors, because God will be the most, important thing in your important uh, thing in your life. Your submission to God alone will be the most important thing in your life. Your love for God will be far more than your love for your business, your love for money, your love for your parents, or anything for that matter. God says those who believe they love God the most. So if you love God the most, you choose God, right? If you love something more than something else, you're always going to choose that, right? If you have to make a choice. If you like chocolates, you know, more than, let's say, I don't know, pastries, if you have to make a choice, you'll choose chocolates, right? So it's simple idea, right? So that's how you're tested, to see where your love is, where your loyalties are, where your devotion is. Are you devoted absolutely to God alone, or is your devotion divided in some fashion, right? So this is where we will be tested, and we have to be ready for it. We have to be strong, and we have to know that when we are tested, that we have to pray to God that when we're tested, we don't fail, and God supports us, and God makes it easy for us, so that we can be part of those people that pass their test, who uh, when they're given that this good news that God is talking about, that they could be part of that. you know just if we can barely miss hell, I mean, God says it's a great triumph. But we want to be with those people who strive in the cause of God. God says they are higher in ranks, and God is giving them good news that they're greater in rank. And so we should try to be in that category, you know, inshallah. We all make it, but we know it's not easy. So we definitely need to, seek God's help always, and not be complacent about it, and pray to God that He keeps us in the right path and keep us guided, so we always make the right choices. So with that, I will end. And if you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free.
Mashallah. Thank you, brother.
Mhm.
Yes, I would like to, I mean, this verse, it starts from verse 16. The inevitable test, exactly, very important subject here in this part of the surah, that God is questioning people that, did you think that you will be left alone without God distinguishing those? I mean, a lot of people think, okay, now they have, proclaimed that I believe in God alone. They corrected their shahada and everything. But the tests is mandatory, not only mandatory, it's inevitable. I mean, there is no way that anybody will be left alone to say, proclaim that, and not be tested about it. That is why we are here for this whole test. Our entire purpose of our life is to pass that test, to go through that test. I mean, this test would be so big that because we wanted to go to the higher heaven, because we made a covenant with God that we will believe in you as only Lord and Master, and we took the responsibility of free will, and the animals and everything else refused. They said, we rather not go through this test, because it seems to be very hard. And but we thought, yes, we could. I mean, look at the world, what is happening right now. How many people are believing in God alone and worshiping Him alone? And throughout the history, every time a messenger came, they were shaken. Believers were shaken every time. God says that to the extent that they shaken so much through the tests that they screamed, "Where is God's victory?" And God's victory is near. God says, mashallah, like you mentioned, Brother Suleman, that the test, it won't be test if it wasn't hard, right? It won't be. God knows. This is if we have a weak area or weak, we are weak about our love for children or spouse or friends or siblings, and we love them even though, let's say, they are not believers, siblings, and you still love them. You'll be tested, and whether you ally with them, like even the allying is not only in the situation of like you completely ally with them, you still keep your religion. And for example, you have two siblings, one is a believer, one is not a believer, and for something a matter comes and your allegiance is towards the non-believing sibling than the believing, even that is wrong. In even small matters, you do not become their ally. You have to be allied with your brethren in faith, um, for the sake of God, because you will be allying with the truth, inshallah.
Nidit, can you give an example of the one you said about the two siblings? Maybe just
Yes,
for
for
clarity.
example, you know, they there is like a family matter, right? And something, I don't know, it happens sometimes in life. It has happened personally, that for something that you would say something against, on a personal level, to the disbelieving sibling, about you're mad at your believer sibling, and you're just had a kind of a dispute on personal level, and you go to that and you take their side, the other one, and tell them things about the believing sibling, right? And this is to very, I mean, you are not, you still be with the truth, because you know who's on the right side, because the disbelievers would not, their priorities are different. So it's just personal life. I have experienced something like that, and
Mhm.
anyways, it
Well, I mean, I see that, like, if there are personal disputes, that's different to me. Like, if you have a personal dispute with someone, that is totally different from allying with the believers against the disbelievers instead of the believers, right? Because, like, let's say, it makes sense, like, if there's a religious dispute between believers and disbelievers, right? And you ally with the disbelievers against the believers, so you clearly fail the test, right? But let's say if there's some kind of dispute between them going on, and like, let's say you have two sisters, one is a believer and one is a disbeliever, and you ally with the disbelieving sister, but the dispute is not totally a personal dispute. Um, like, it's a totally, I think I see it as a different thing than, say, if it's a religious dispute. If it's a religious dispute, then that's different. But let's say you have two siblings, one of them is a submitter, one of them is not, and they're not fighting you or anything, but they just have a dispute. And what maybe your submitter one is at mistake. So you're saying you will side with the submitter one because she's a submitter
it is
against the other one?
something.
That doesn't sound. If they, let's say,
No, it is
yeah, yeah.
still,
Mm,
because if the other one always had this one stance about something in life, they would not understand. And the little delicate things, sometimes if the third person who is playing in between them and siding with them and saying things about, the one of the sibling and who is a believer, it is still, I feel like, not even if they were right or wrong, it is something to has to do with the religion actually. And but in not very directly, indirectly. However, yeah, but of course the test will be about between God and other people, like if they say, "You you don't practice your religion and be like us, then you're with us." That is the test. But I'm just saying, we have to be careful who we align in our
Mm-hmm.
daily
Mm-hmm.
lives too. If we choose one over the other, for any matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was seeing it like, let's say, if there's a dispute between two sisters, like the brothers with the one with the one sheep and one with the 99 sheep. And let's say the one with the 99 sheep the one with the one sheep is wrong, but he's a submitter. So I'll give my judgment in favor of him, and I'll side with him because he's a submitter. I mean, that would be wrong, right? And you can't say, well, because he's a submitter, I'm allying with him over this. But I
No,
see that more. No, I'm just
okay.
clarifying it for people
I
who are
I
not.
got it. I got it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I got
But
it.
it would. So for me, it's almost inevitably comes to it's about God. The
Hmm.
situation revolves around siding with God, siding with the believers, or over something about God. You know.
Yes, of course, of course. The
Yeah.
test will be about that.
Hmm.
And I believe it happens in many people's life when they embrace submission. People like literally see you in a different light. Your own siblings, your own relatives, and they turn against you. So whether are you gonna care about their, what they feel about you, or you will be pleasing only God alone. So this is where the priority goes, and it doesn't matter. It's up to them whether would be they can respect you and be peaceful with you, or they can fight. But you cannot choose, of course, between God and believers over them. Like some would say, "Oh, where are you going for Quran studies?" And is that your family? We always have to remember what our family, real family is.
So I don't see. Speaking of family, I don't see anyone from your family recently on the last two studies. I think there must be a family event or something. They're all busy.
Yeah, I know. Don't know. Yeah, Saturday
Mm.
study.
Yeah, we didn't see them on the previous
Hmm.
study, so I was just,
Family
you know,
business,
yeah.
I guess.
So, well, I mean, these verses, a lot of the parts of Surah 9 just, talks about these Arabs and, it's a question to the Arabs. I mean, you never hear the Muslims talk about these verses, right? I mean,
Oh,
how they're
yeah.
concealed. Yeah.
Not only
And,
the Arabs are dear to them, but the
hmm
language itself is, whether they are
hmm
cursing you in Arabic, is still
hmm
sacred language. Sacred language. And watering the
Yeah.
pilgrims, mashallah.
hmm
That what they worship, that water, that Ab Zamzam,
hmm
right?
hmm
Oh, you're going to Hajj, bring us that little bit of water. It's like, It's same to that Catholic church if you go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have holy water.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the Pope is giving them turns holy. So this is a holy water where we just nullify our Hajj by making anything, giving anything power other than God. And that's they idolize this water,
Mm-hmm.
like by touching this water, drinking this water, you will become more righteous. And
Mm-hmm.
oh, somebody says, I have my coffin, like the white sheet when you die, they wrap
Mm-hmm. The
around
coffin.
you. Not the coffin, but coffin. I'm
Yeah, well,
saying,
yeah, but I mean that's their coffin, right? I mean they actually don't have a
yeah, their
coffin.
coffin in a so the white sheet. Oh, it's
Mm-hmm.
they go to Hajj and bring that coffin dipped in. It's dipped in holy water for my funeral. Okay, so when I die, you wrap me in this. So that is your ways to go straight to heaven. Yes, the things like that. They're gonna make you believe that money business. Of course, nothing is bigger business than setting up based on religious dramas.
Yeah, I mean also these
They
verses. Sorry, go ahead.
only go ahead. Sorry,
No,
you
no, go
talk.
ahead.
They pray when they go to Hajj or Umrah that, like especially those are older age, like please let me die during Hajj, and whoever dies during Hajj and their family consider them they are in the best heaven. That's what they believe, or they will pray, take my life when I'm in sujood. I mean, do you really think these kind of acts will make you wipe off your sins and be forgiven on the day of judgment? They
Mm-hmm.
totally miss the point. Like you're talking about the Abi Zamzam, yeah, we used to have people come from Makkah and they bring it and we will put in, save it and drink it little bit. We gave it so much power that it's gonna heal you, it's gonna do this to you. All these different forms of idol worships, mashallah.
Well, Adam, God listens to their prayers. They get trampled during
Yep,
Hajj anyway.
stampede.
Stampede.
Yep,
Can you imagine what painful death that is?
yep, yep.
Or even if you
People walking around
survive
you.
that, my God, that's so scary.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean you'd have like PTSD the rest of your life if you survive that.
Exactly, for sure.
Mm.
My God. I remember last time one of my brother was at Hajj, and this stampede happened during that time. It's 2,000 people died, something like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, just like that. So yeah, but these Arabs, they don't care. Big
Yeah,
business.
here you are stoning this Satan, and then you find yourself standing with him. What you die?
Stoning the sick,
Mm-hmm.
Satan is another
Yeah.
hilarious thing what they do. Like people take their shoes off and throw. Like, oh, all my anger is going towards this Satan. The harder I hate him, and
Well, they have every right to be angry at him because he has trapped them. They,
You know, listen to this. So, what this stampede happened in 2015, right? And so the number of people that died, so one press news report reported 2,411, right? People died. The other news agency reported 2,236 people died, right? Then the individual reports from the nationalities of the victims, that were actually reported, they counted them independently. Those were 2,431 people. And then the government of Saudi Arabia reported that 769 people died.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah, Saudi has needs
Their
some math
lives.
classes.
Yeah,
Oh
His math
yeah.
is very
exactly.
Press
bad.
press is very free over there. For
Hmm.
sure. Everything is so controlled.
It's amazing. Verse 17 is God says,
Hmm.
the idol worshippers are not to be frequent masjids of God. How amazing that is. That they do go to masjid, but these masjids are not the masjid of God. They're masjid of their idol worshipping place. So technically, they are not, except the Khana Kaaba. That is where all this stuff is happening. So they do go to masjid, but they are not the masjids of God. And those they are really submitted to God alone masjids, and they don't come there anyway. So how God is preventing them to, from going to the right masjids, and they claim so much that when you go to Mecca, when you do this one salat over there, that's like equal to 250,000 salats. And when I was like a kid, when I used to hear this stuff, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. This is not fair. I am born here, and those people they born in Mecca, each salat they're getting 250,000 times, and I'm getting just one credit. Where's the justice? I mean, look how they make it so much that people will strive to go there and do some salats over there. So they have more business, so more tourists coming there. All kind of the schemes that they issue, where God is telling here in verse number 19, that do you think you're gonna be the same if you care for the people that coming to the masjid? You're providing, and those people they're working in the masjid, in the Khana Kaaba, even the people are mopping the floor, and you see the video, people are saying, oh subhanallah, I mean, just look at these people, they are earning so much credit cleaning the floor, dream. And there are people walking around in the Khana Kaaba with the backpack has water, and they're passing water to people, and people are praising them that, wow, you know that you guys are doing a good job, and you don't know how much credit you are earning. And right here in verse 19, God is saying, do you think that's going to be equal to the one who really submit to God and immigrate and all that stuff? I mean, all that nonsense. I mean, everything is just right in front of us, but these people don't understand. Do you think the verse number 20 is talking about those who believe and immigrate and strive in the cause of God with their money and their lives? Is like, do you have to immigrate to different places, like all these different religion people, they go to different areas and preach? So is that what they're talking about, and God is talking about, that you
No
have to
people.
immigrate?
No people who immigrate. I mean, in the
Yeah,
cause
they,
of God is like when you're oppressed, you're
Hmm.
in a country, you're oppressed, and you're persecuted because of religion. You want to practice religion freely, you immigrate, right?
Okay,
You know.
so
yeah,
you choose,
because
it's
of
like,
God.
also it's talking in the same sense as a test as your relatives. Like, if you leave, you're gonna leave a lot of your wealth behind, so you can worship God alone. So for your
Yeah,
relatives and all.
yes.
Yeah, that too. Of course, that could be part of that. You have to make a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, for any reason, that even like some people will go, okay, I immigrate, I'm going to be near a community, or I have nobody here. I mean, you can still make a choice, and God will never let it go to waste, but for sure. Or to preach, even, you say, okay, I'm going
Hmm.
emigrating in any way.
Yeah, Ali, you can immigrate to California and
Exactly,
be.
Ali. What are
uh,
you doing
Yeah,
there in Texas, man?
yeah.
I'm still, I can freely practice my religion here. If that
There is
happens, then
no
I'm
pressure.
coming. No pressure here yet.
Yeah, next door to this beach. Why not?
Yeah, that's true.
If I would have a choice, I would live in California. My God, who doesn't want to be there?
It's so amazing how these verses, when like verse 20, immigrate, and then verse 23 is align yourself with your parents and sibling, and they're like God is talking in the similar sense. Yeah, that if you align
Mhm.
with them and leave God, like if they don't want to talk to you, they don't welcome you their home, and if you go to their even home and you don't practice your salat your way because they're gonna mind, or anything that you do that's against the religion, because they will get upset and you're aligned with themselves. One time we went to a place and they're literally dragging us. They're gonna do the salat their way, and so my son was looking for me, and he told my wife that, oh, I think Papa is joining with them, and my wife was like, why would he do salat with them, regular salat? And she came running to me, and I said, she saw me sitting somewhere, and she said, oh, I thought you were gonna do salat with them. And I literally made, when you like cut your throat sign, I said, no, I'd rather die than do this. Like how I would rather die to join these people. I mean, I will not do the. I'll do my own. My own
So
salat.
you just made the gesture.
Yeah, just like you cut your throat
That could
like
also
this. I say I'd
translate
rather
to
do.
"I will kill you."
No, 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 to on myself, So yeah, and then this
I'm just
lady,
kidding.
she turned my wife's direction during the salat. That you're on the wrong direction. I said, why did you move? You should have stand dead weight on
Hmm.
on that spot. She would have to.
Hmm.
If he picks you up, you go back to the spot. You don't do that.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing it for God, not because of them. If they kick you out, that's fine. Bye bye. We don't care.
They didn't put like dupatta on her head.
Yeah, they some yeah they sometimes they do, and I object to that. You do
There's
whatever
silly
how you do
things,
it.
you
How
know.
you know.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
like if you pray, like like I've heard stories, that the traditional Muslims, they see a submitter praying, they make objections like, why aren't you covering your head? And some will come and tell you you're praying the wrong way. And I mean, but you
Right.
see people like, you know, here, I mean, people are very respectful when they see you praying. People who are not even, they're not, idol worshippers, right? Traditional hypocrites, and they see you praying. They pretend they don't even see you, and they respectfully leave. And if they come close to you and distract you, they apologize. And here you have these people literally like, you know, moving you around and pushing you in different, forcing you to pray like them. Yeah. Anyways, I mean, God, says that, this was like at the end of the surah, right? There's a warning for these people, that, God would, take the religion away from them and the message away from them. And he did, because these people did not appreciate the message, and God took it away from them. And now, obviously we know that Makkah is not the most important community. The United States is, and that's where the submission will prevail, and this is where the message will flourish. And so, but these people are like it says in verse 97 also, the Arabs. It said the Arabs are the worst. Arabs are the worst in disbelief and hypocrisy, and the most likely to ignore the laws that God has revealed to His messenger. And you can see that when you go to Saudi Arabia, the laws they have in place are totally against the Quran. There's no freedom of religion. You're not even allowed to be to be in Mecca. Not to come to Kaaba, right? But to live in Mecca or Medina, you have to live in other cities like Bahrain and stuff, and still, like, I mean, there's so much oppression, and the punishment for every other thing is killing. and so cruel. And of course, they have the chopping of the hands and um, punishments for adultery or against the Quran, and completely ignoring all of God's laws that God has put in place. Total hypocrites. But God, I mean, these are the worst of the worst, is how the Quran describes the Arabs. I mean, there's a article that the Messenger of the Covenant wrote, uh, and it says that the Arabs have fallen from God's grace, and God has forsaken the Arabs, and that's why we don't see like a single Arab person in submission to this day. This was the same at the time of the messenger. It's the same now. There's not a single Arab that we know who became a submitter. Well, at least not from Saudi Arabia, right? But there's other places, for example, there may be mixed blood, between someone who is Arab and some other person. Maybe they came and they maybe settled somewhere in the Arabian Peninsula. They will become submitters, but the Arabs, the pure Arabs, they're just, I mean, God knows obviously, which souls to assign to which nationality, right? Which people, like which country, what place. And so all the souls that are coming as those people, I mean, God says they're the worst of the worst. There may be very, very few exceptions, right? But we have yet to find them.
Yeah, and it's their language, and they should be able to read it more clearly without even translation. There are so many black and white verses, like Surah 18, the verse 109, where God is talking about
Hmm.
the seven oceans, and then right after that, God says, "Say to them that I'm just a human being like
Hmm.
you." I mean, what is
Yeah.
difficult to understand,
Hmm.
you know? And then this verse
Yeah,
that you're reading, go ahead,
hmm
sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
No, it's okay. I'll finish.
No, no, please. I hate to cut you
Is
off.
that like verse 24? They pull this kind of words out, like this surah number, verse number 24 says that, the I was talking proclaim if your parents and children. So we go down to that part. It says are more beloved than God and His messenger. So beloved, more beloved that to love God and His messenger. So they literally take this kind of words out that they have to love the messenger, obey God and obey the messenger. So all these kind of things are all over the Quran, that he's like in the same level as God, because he's mentioned right next to God. Messenger is a duty, a job, like a city issues laws to follow. So what does the messenger do? He follows the laws. So he has the message. So he has the message. Of God. He's a servant of God. So he has the message. So in that sense, obey God and messenger, because he has a message. He himself is just a human being as a person, but he is as his job as like a police officer. That's his duty, because he's holding the message. And that is what you follow. This is the meaning of. This is some sense of the meaning of these verses. They take it out and they say, "Oh, he is mentioned right next to God, so we have to give him that status."
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
he
going
is
back
more
to.
than God to them, though. Sorry, my phone
Oh,
just.
True, true.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, going back. Uh, uh,
Sorry, go ahead, Salman.
no, it's okay. I was gonna say just going back to the Arabs. Like I came across a lot of, not a lot of people, but quite a few people that are from the Arabian Peninsula, because like the Arabian Peninsula is not just Saudi Arabia, right? When the messenger talked about the Arabian Peninsula, it's quite big. Pretty much covers like Iraq, Palestine, Iraq on the one side, Palestine on the other side, and so it's pretty huge. And so includes like Jordan and stuff. And I saw people, that are from these regions, and I thought for a long time these people were submitters, and I was always like puzzled. I was like, yeah, well, God talks about this, and but how come like I see these people are from these areas, and these people are, I don't think they're hypocrites. At the time, obviously, they didn't look like hypocrites, but now I see with time that they were hypocrites because they were such good hypocrites that it was very difficult to distinguish them from others, right? I mean, uh, well, how can I say this? Yeah, I think the hypocrites that are worse. I mean, I don't know. It's just my idea. Maybe it's like, they're harder to tell. Those hypocrites are the real hypocrites, right? Like, uh, well, they're all real, but like, I mean, the hypocrites that will blend in so well with the believers that you will not know that they're hypocrites, and they're the most, well, also very dangerous, right? Because they will be the ones that God says, they sit among the believers. This is why they're worse, because they sit among the believers and you consider them as brothers and sisters. Well, they are the worst people, right? So all those people, turned out to be hypocrites. Now that the way I see it, and now that I look back, I mean, some of them are not even submitters anymore. Like clearly they just left submission, and some rejected the messenger in the span of maybe the last 7, 8 years. Uh, and yeah, so like, we don't see them. It's amazing how this just fact just stands the test of time.
I love this subtitle. It's good news, So basically, God also tells us messengers bring news from God, It's like a means of communication. God has told us in the Quran that God communicates with his people in few ways, like one of them being sending his messengers, because obviously God would not himself deliver the message, then the whole issue will be just gone. So, and they bring news to you from God. So basically they're, like at that time anchors, you know, they're the medium at that time. So obviously we have to listen to, pay attention to those news. And if we don't believe in the the person who's giving you the communicating with you, then you would not be able to listen what they're saying. You're already biased. So basically, but it's like when they're gone, they forget about whose news they were bringing, and you want to find that the newscaster, right? And you don't even remember what the news was anymore. But I have to find the one who brought somebody's news, and that he was important. And in their
Mhm.
life, messengers are important, and you have to trust them and listen to them. If you will believe in them, obviously you will be able to listen to them. So then don't follow other people at that time or their opinion, or whatever they have left for you from God. You just follow that. because they themselves followed it. Like, oh, people will say, so you don't believe in Muhammad. I mean, what do you mean by that? You don't believe in Muhammad? If we didn't believe he was messenger of God, then how do we believe in Quran? Like who delivered the Quran to us? We have to believe he was a
Hmm.
messenger. We have to believe previous messengers were authentic. Other than Quran?
Right. I was speaking of Muhammad, like, I was mentioning earlier the verse where God has given warning to the Arabs, So I wanted to read that verse. It's like a curse for these people, 47:38. The last verse, it says, subtitle warning to the Arabs, I'm not going to read the whole verse, but it says, warning to the Arabs, if you turn away, and the message of the covenant put it in bold. It says, if you turn away, he will substitute other people in your place, and they will not be like you. And then it says footnote says the Quran was given to the Arabs in their language for 1400 years, but they clearly rejected it and refused to believe that it is complete. They fabricated hadith and sunnah. And so, the reason I wanted to read that is the Message of the Covenant published a submitter's perspective about this, also explaining parts of this thing relating to the Arabs in one of his perspectives in 1986, November 1986. And it's the title of that thing. I mean, it's the entire perspective is about the Arabs. And it says, Arabs dismissed from God's grace, incurring the ultimate curse, Surah Muhammad, verse 38, 19 times 2. It said, door of repentance, another heading, door of repentance closed on Arabs. It says, Arabs forbidden from seeing the miracle of the Quran because of their unappreciative disregard of God's message to them. So it says that the last 10 years of the 14th Islamic century witnessed the great oil bonanza for the Arabs. This appears to mark the beginning of the end of them. Verses 44 through 46 of Surah 6 teach us that, along with the oil bonanza, God has taken away the Arabs' ability to hear, see, or understand. The evidence is overwhelming that the Arabs' ability to comprehend God's signs has been taken away. Seemingly intelligent Arabs who would talk to you about this world's sciences and philosophies suddenly turn utterly dumb when it comes to Quran and its irrefutable mathematical miracle. Verse 44 of Surah 6 states, because they disregarded the message given to them, we opened for them the gates of everything. Then, just as they rejoiced in the material things given to them, we seized them evidently, and they become utterly stunned. SubhanAllah, I mean, it's so amazing like how this wealth is flowing and you see them building these tall skyscrapers and beautiful buildings, with lights and such glamour, how we're seeing this in action, subhanallah. This is verse 46 then informs us that God takes away their hearing, their eyesight, and seals their minds. Of course, this curse refers to anything and everything having to do with God. They can no longer hear, see, or understand God's message. And then it says, here is the evidence. The top religious scholars of the Arab world held a meeting in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, to look at the Quran's mathematical miracle under the leadership of Saudi Arabia's Grand Mufti Abdul Aziz bin Baz. The official title of Ben Baz is President of the Departments of Scientific Research and Rules and Dawah and Guidance. See Arabic inlay for his official stationery. Ben Baz, by the way, is the notorious scholar who still believes the earth is flat. See New York Times, December 14, 1984. The top Arab scholars published their findings throughout the world, including their English publication, Impact International, 21st August 1986, page 3. And it says, um, judging from this report, it is obvious that these leading Arab scholars are hopelessly stuck on the very first item of God's undeniable mathematical miracle. As shown in the photocopy from Impact, they decided that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which is the first verse of Quran, contains neither 19 letters nor 4 words. This is talking about their math skills. Now they're even trying to remove the Bismillah from the Quran altogether. Apparently, the idiots think that if Bismillah is removed, the whole miracle will collapse. This is the first proof that they are utterly forbidden from seeing the miracle. In my translation of the Quran, footnote Surah 1, verse 1, stated that Bismillah is the quote unquote foundation upon which a great miracle is built. The great Arab scholars figured that if they destroy the quote unquote foundation, then the whole structure would come down. Um, a terrible dilemma for the great Arab scholars is that any grade school student who looks at the Bismillah at the top of Sheikh Ben Baz's own stationery and count the words, he or she will see 4 words and 19 letters. How would they convince that student that the Bismillah contains neither just 19 letters nor 4 words? It is noteworthy that the great Arab scholars did not tell us exactly how many letters and or words are in the Bismillah. And it says Lisa Spray of Massachusetts quipped, they must be still counting the letters and words of Bismillah. Naturally, the great Arab scholars did not say a thing about the fact that the letter Qaf is mentioned 57 times, 19 times 3 in each of the Qaf initial surahs 42 and 50. They said nothing about the physical fact that the Sa'd initial surahs 7, 19, and 38 contain 152 Sa'ds, or 19 times 8. They said nothing about the profound physical fact that Hamim initial surahs contain 2,147 Ha's and Meems, 19 times 113. They said nothing about the established and easy to confirm fact that Yasin contains precisely 285 Ya and Sin, 19 times 15, and so on. Is this not positive proof that God has taken away their hearing, their eyesight, and sealed their minds? Surah 6, verse 46. Now let us see how confused these scholars are. So shown below is a photocopy of 2 letters from Dr. Abdul Rauf, rector of the International Islamic University, Malaysia. Dr. Abdul Rauf is an internationally recognized Muslim scholar. In his letter dated December 18, 1985, he stated that the Bismillah is either 17 letters or 20 letters. He doesn't know, in parentheses. However, in a letter dated September 16, 1986, he counts 19 letters in the Bismillah and adds the numerical value, the famous number 786. Um, a book sponsored by the Saudi Rabat Al Alam Al Islami was authored a few years ago by brother Dr. Ahmad Sakr under the title Islamic Orations. Dr. Sakr is the former director of the Rabitat office in New York. On page 209, 19 times 11 of his book, the subject 786 or 786 begins. The number 786 is famous throughout the Muslim world. Millions of Muslims uh, write at the top of their letters or notes, etc., as a substitute for Bismillah. As shown from Dr. Abdul Rauf's letter on page 2, the number 786 represents the total numerical value of the Bismillah's Arabic alphabet letters. The chapter titled 786 is in Dr. Sakr's book deals with the numerical value of Bismillah. On page 214, Dr. Sakr states, remember, dear Muslims, that if you read Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which is composed of 19 letters, you will be rewarded by Allah 190 times or 380 times accordingly. Please note that in addition to Dr. Sakr's statement that Bismillah contains 19 letters, The numbers of rewards that he lists, 190 and 380, are multiples of 19. But there is no greater sign of confusion on the part of the great Arab scholars than the fact that they thanked me at the beginning of their report. See the photocopy on page 2, then called me kafir, accusing me of disbelief and apostasy towards the end of the report. Did they all of a sudden discover I was kafir while writing the final report on their lengthy meeting? Did they thank me before? Did they thank me before discovering that I was kafir? Did they thank me before discovering that I was kafir? It is no surprise to the readers of Muslim perspective that the enemies of Islam around the world, be them Orientalists or evangelists, etc., have gladly decided to leave the fight against the Quran to the Arab scholars. It, so true. Although they recognize the truthfulness and awesome power of the Quran's mathematical miracle, they no longer need to oppose it. Our Muslim scholars are doing a job at keeping the people away from it, doing a better job at keeping the people away from it. I have to quote here Brother Abdul Aziz Qasim of Singapore. I met this guy. A lot of people, including the learned, reject the miracle of 19, even though they know it is the truth. Do they ever think that the miracle can help mankind and the Muslims in the cause of God? To the non-Muslims, we can invite them. Those of weak faith, we can help them. The Jews and the Christians, we can invite them and oppose those. And those who have gone astray, we have the opportunity to bring them back. Have they, the scholars, ever considered these benefits? What is wrong with them? P.S. Among the millions of believers in the Quran's mathematical miracle, there's not a single Arab. Uh, That's it.
Wow, I mean, that's
Amma,
amazing how you laid it out, all of it. That's, I mean, if it was a court, you have proven your case. And the judgment can't be issued right now, mashallah.
Mhm.
in such strong words, subhanallah. So true.
But compare this submerged perspective to the submerged perspectives that we read these days.
Oh, big difference. We see that. They
Yeah, I mean,
he
these were the
used to
real
hit the nail
submerged
right on the head,
perspectives. Hmm. And he wouldn't shy away from naming
Yeah,
people, naming organizations, naming the hypocrites, the enemies.
right.
He was. I mean, and imagine this, and imagine like these are the people that are threatening him and issuing fatwas against him and all that stuff. He's not afraid to speak his mind and stand for God. Subhanallah, against the Arabs. Who were so wealthy, are so wealthy now and then, and fall or after his head and everything.
They were among some of the very arrogant. Like, I heard a lot of stories from the poor people that go to work in their country, and they used to come back and they used to say that they treated us like worse than slave, call us all kind of names. Sometimes they won't let us enter their shop. They call, like, dirty people, this, get out of here. I mean, do you think that? And then when the salat time comes, they close their shop and go to salat, and they come back and they yell at them. What kind of
Yeah,
nonsense that is?
yeah. I mean, it's worse than that actually. I saw a documentary on that, and I mean, it's worse than that even. Like, I mean, and they take away their passports. They're
Oh
literally just
yes.
slaves. They can't travel, do anything. A lot of these kids, a lot of these people come as kids, young guys, like, in their early teen and their late teen, years and stuff. And I mean, they even rape them and stuff. I mean, they're traumatizing. I mean, I just was so disturbing to watch. I mean, they've
They
built their
hire
whole
those
cities
kids.
on slaves like that.
They're the worst when it comes to human rights. Simple. You can always tell where they don't have democracy and they impose their own laws and absolutely people's free will is taken away. They're horrendous. Anything which challenges their status quo, you're put to death, simply. Life
Yeah,
of
no
human
question.
being means nothing to them.
I mean, look how blind they are. Like they can't even count the letters and words. How they're trying to fight it. They refuse to believe that there's 19 letters in the small letters.
Yeah, that was amazing. And when you said they're deaf, dumb, and blind, literally, they cannot read.
Yeah.
And they would crowd people like on the street. They would just ask them, "Do you have your ID?" There was this guy's story that he was working in a shop and he has that the work permit, and he just stepped out of the shop to get something, and then they were crowding people. They would just stop people and start checking their ID, and they were loading people in the buses. And he said, "I work in this shop. My ID is in that shop. Let me go get it." They don't won't even let him go back, and they put him in the bus, and they took him to the center, and later his some relative had to bring the ID, and it took like forever to get him out of it. I mean, this is how bad it was.
Hmm. And when I was reading this, I've read this before, but this time I read it. Well, it even stood out to me more, when it talks about the oil bonanza, right? I mean, like 50 years ago, there was no such thing, or 60 years ago, I don't know exactly, 1930s, I think. They, or maybe later, I think, I forgot exactly when they discovered oil. They're like that, but like they had no such thing as oil, and I mean the whole Arabian Peninsula. I mean, it's all desert and everything, right? And so was like Dubai and Kuwait and all of those places, right? And that's and I see how the Messenger of the Covenant describes how, like, they said this oil discovery of this oil bonanza is the beginning of their end. It's like they're being taken to the high floor before being thrown out the building, kind of thing. And how they're so filthy rich now.
Wow. Mashallah, if you see, we have a chapter in the Quran called the Romans, and also that they were so powerful, and how they built and everything. I mean, if you just go to Italy, Greece, you will see the civilization, so they must have thought they were literally like gods, a lot of paganism was there too.
Hmm.
And then they got defeated, and there is a reason for even stories like that in the Quran, and this is happening to same thing happening. I mean, like Dubai looks so gross. Like I was there for
Hmm.
a month once, and it's just nothing but like a big shopping center. There's no nature
Hmm.
left. It's so messed up, and people just love it. And you will see one sheikh walking with like 15 women, behind him, who will all will be in burqas, and the sheikh walking ahead of them, and they will be behind him, and all they do is shopping, and just like there's so much wealth that their brains have gone completely, like when you're not even earning the right kind of money, and you don't even appreciate anything. So much vanity you will see. It's nothing like nothing other than Las Vegas. It's the Vegas of buildings and shopping plazas. Everything fake. So I had a
Yeah,
job
imagine,
opportunity. Then I
imagine how they have so many wives, right? And then they put these burqas on them. Like they're afraid that someone will steal them from them. Like, yeah, so many wives.
Yeah. But these
Oh
women
no.
focus all on
No.
their eyes. All the makeup is on the eyes, then perfume.
Mm-hmm.
The perfume will leave a trail
Mm-hmm.
behind you. They walk away. I'm like, whoa, what was that? Yeah, they find the means of attractions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Those
and
who
who
have
knows?
fought.
Some of them will be, young girls from here, lured into, being their wives and stuff. Well, those ones there, they keep them locked out and stuff. Those ones, there's don't even let them come out. The Western ones, a lot of them. There's so many stories.
Or at least they're following the religion, keeping them in the burqas.
Hmm. How can they shop with so many wives?
I know all they
Money
do is
The
shop
talks.
chaos.
all day in the shopping malls.
They must have like designated people, like to keep them organized and everything.
The probably the highest number of Lamborghinis are and Ferraris are in their state, and some of the police cars are even Ferrari. And
Mm-hmm.
even they have some people they gold plate all the whole their car,
Mm-hmm.
expensive
Mm-hmm.
car. I mean, so much
The
show off, so much. I mean, there are people dying in Africa and other places, and God has given you so
mm-hmm.
much wealth. What are you doing? You know, one thing I see the West,
Mm-hmm.
good thing about the Western countries are like, if there's a disaster, they send money. They open their wallets for if there's a disaster or something. But these people, they fill their own
Mm-hmm.
wallets.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the hypocrisy there. You literally see people living in tents
Yeah,
when you see these people living in skyscrapers, right? So
yeah, yeah. Yeah, very horrible conditions for
the
those
double
people. They come
standards,
build
yeah,
those buildings
yeah.
for them. Yeah. In
Mm-hmm.
the summer heat, 110-degree plus, and these poor people are working, building the stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, all of that aside is like, I mean, what are they doing with the message? Like he said, they left the evangelists and all these other people, you know, they didn't don't have to fight the message. You have the Arabs who are doing the job, a great job, at doing that. Like the evangelists don't have to fight. Nobody else has to fight when you have these people, the Arabs, who have so much money and they're dedicated. Uh, the Orientalists, he said, be them. He says the enemies of Islam around the world, be them Orientalists or evangelists, have gladly decided to leave the fight against the Quran to the Arab scholars because they're doing their best to keep people away from it.
Wow, exactly.
Hmm.
Allahu Akbar.
They even show the picture of the person who I think initiated the killing of the messenger. I mean, if you look at his face, I just saw on the TV. I don't know if that's a real guy, but his face looked so like a Halloween face. I mean, very very scary, and you could see, oh my God, very scary.
Does the state of Arizona has death? Does state of Arizona have death penalty for the murder or no?
Texas for sure, but not. I don't know about Arizona. They're more
Mm,
liberal in that sense.
right. I mean, the sign of like signs were always there. He was caught 19 years later in Canada, exactly 19 years after his death.
I think they suspended capital punishment in Arizona in 2014.
Oh, okay.
The group that hired him was from Pakistan,
Really?
Al Fuqara.
Oh my God, they are the worst. what movements are running in Pakistan are the deepest gone um, far astray, and it is so deep in idol worshipping of
Hmm.
Muhammad. Oh my
But
God.
you know, the Arabs are behind it, you know, because the Arabs have been the one who had been investing in Pakistan with all these religious madrasas and
Absolutely.
groups, right?
Yes.
Osama
Yeah.
bin Laden, you know, is from Saudi Arabia, and I mean, um, and like you know, I was watching this documentary actually. So his father was in the construction business, you know, Osama bin Laden's father, and his company was the one that built, you know, discovered, in that built all of these refineries for them, you know, when they discovered oil, and that's how he got rich, you know, in all this Arab world, and then, so then with all that wealth, you know, what they did is, you know, they're using it to fight, right? So then he left the company and then he started building
God, then we will earn the credit. So here's money. They shower them with monies. All these mullah organizations are run by Saudi dollars. I mean, Saudi money. Okay, so
I guess we can end. So God willing, who will be our next teacher
Ali.
on Tuesday? Ali?
Hmm.
Okay, inshallah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
inshallah. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. God willing, our next study is going to be on Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time, and God willing, our teacher will be Ali. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.